Have you ever noticed how the men you truly respect barely speak, while others perform for approval? These men create gravity through absence. Your mind whispers that you need more. More words, more charm, more validation. It lies. What if everything you've been taught about earning respect is precisely what keeps it forever out of reach? Silent power is not weakness. Society has trained you to fill every void with noise, to wear the mask of constant engagement. Is this mask protecting you or enslaving you? The storm rages outside, opinion, judgment, chaos. Yet something prevents you from finding your anchor. Control exists in stillness. The voice in your head resists this truth because it knows what's at stake. Your worth is not negotiable. Yet how many times today did you silently beg for approval? Count them. The gap between who you are alone and who you pretend to be. This is where men break. The marble doesn't explain itself. What you do when no one is watching reveals everything. This contradiction tears at you. The more desperately you seek respect, the more completely it evades your grasp. The ancient Stoics understood what modern men have forgotten. There is a price for genuine respect, one most aren't willing to pay. Your reactions betray you. Your need to be understood undermines you. Notice how quickly you defend yourself. The room goes quiet when a centered man enters, not because he demands attention, but because he doesn't require it. Steel doesn't ask permission. I could tell you that these 10 habits will transform how others see you, but that would miss the point entirely. These principles aren't about manipulating perceptions. They cut deeper. The ocean doesn't negotiate with the shore. When you truly grasp what these Stoic practices reveal, you'll understand why the man who masters silence holds power over those who cannot bear it. The door stands ajar. Will you remain trapped in the prison of endless validation, or step through to the other side? The silence carries a weight most men spend their lives running from. You feel it now, that pressure in your chest when no one is speaking, when you're alone with the riot of your thoughts. Why is stillness so threatening? Perhaps because in silence you finally hear yourself clearly. The noise was never protecting you, it was hiding you from yourself. The storm inside doesn't need your attention to exist. Your mind tells you that control means constant vigilance, endless planning, the suffocating grip of anxiety disguised as preparation. Lies. True control begins at the edge of surrender, not to chaos, but to what is. The oak doesn't strain against the wind. It roots deeper. When did you forget this wisdom that lives in your bones? The stillness waits for you to remember. We admire the man who speaks rarely because his silence reveals something we've lost. Not weakness, discipline. Not absence, presence. The modern world trains you to perform, to fill every moment with proof of your value. Yet value isn't earned through noise. Mountains don't announce themselves. They simply stand, indifferent to approval or criticism. Their authority is in their being. The ancient Stoics understood what we struggle to accept. That power lies not in controlling the world, but in mastering our response to it. Look at your reactions today. How many were choices and how many were compulsions? Count them. The gap between impulse and action. This is where dignity lives or dies. This space determines whether you are ruled or ruling. You weren't born afraid of silence. You learned to fear it. Society rewards the quick response, the clever retort, the constant engagement. But what if your greatest strength lies in the pause before speaking? What if respect comes not from what you say, but what you choose to ignore? The mind resists this truth because it threatens the identity you've built, the one that needs external confirmation to exist. Pain isn't your enemy. Resistance to pain is what breaks men. The suffering that teaches nothing is the suffering you refuse to face. When was the last time you sat with discomfort without reaching for distraction? When did you last allow criticism to land without defensive armor? These moments reveal your true relationship with power. Control isn't dominance over others, it's sovereignty over yourself. The man who commands instant respect has learned something most never discover. Presence isn't trying to be seen, it's allowing yourself to see. To observe without immediate judgment, to listen without preparing a response, to stand in uncertainty without grabbing for false certainty. Your nervous system interprets this as danger. Your wisdom recognizes it as freedom. Which voice will you honor? If silence has ever saved you from a fall, write, "I stayed quiet" below. This journey isn't meant to be walked alone. Tell me where you're listening from. I want to know where these words are landing. and who is hearing them in the stillness of their own mind. The deeper truth waits in the space between these sentences, in what remains unsaid but understood. Reputation is what others believe about you. Character is what you do when those beliefs no longer matter. In the space between these two worlds, most men lose themselves. They become performers in their own lives, reading the room before they speak, adjusting their stance to match expectations, living in constant fear of exposure. Have you noticed how exhausting this has become? The mask grows heavier every year, until the weight itself becomes familiar, mistaken for your actual face. Your mind whispers that vulnerability is weakness, that control means concealing doubt. Another lie. Look at the men you genuinely respect, not those you envy or fear, but those whose presence brings clarity. Do they hide their limits, or do they acknowledge them without shame? True strength isn't the absence of weakness. It's the integration of all parts of yourself into something coherent, something honest. The fractured man seeks approval. The whole man attracts respect without seeking it. Society has trained you to value reaction speed over response quality. The first to speak, the quickest to act, the most visible in the storm. These are valued in a world drowning in noise, but wisdom grows in the pause between stimulus and response. What if the measure of your maturity isn't how quickly you move, but how deliberately you choose not to move until the moment is right? The ancient philosophers called this the discipline of assent, the power to withhold automatic agreement with your first impressions. Notice the discomfort rising now, the resistance to slowing down, the fear that if you don't fill the space, someone else will. Someone louder, more certain, more convincing. But what are they so desperate to convince others of, if not something they don't fully believe themselves? Confidence that needs constant display isn't confidence, it's compensation. What might emerge if you allowed yourself to be still long enough for the water to clear? The price of genuine respect is paid in private moments no one will ever applaud. The decision to honor your word when breaking it would be easier. The choice to face difficult truths instead of comfortable distortions. The willingness to stand alone when the crowd moves in the wrong direction. These moments accumulate like invisible wealth, showing themselves not in what you claim, but in how you carry yourself. The body doesn't lie about what the mind has endured and overcome. You've been taught that power comes from having options. More choices, more paths, more possibilities. Yet the masters of any craft know a different truth. Power comes from elimination, from removing what is unnecessary, from focusing so completely on what matters that everything else falls away. When did you last experience this clarity? When did you last feel the relief of saying no to what doesn't serve your deepest purpose? The mind resists this narrowing because it threatens the ego's need for constant stimulation. The Stoic paradox reveals itself in this tension. To gain control, you must release the illusion of control. To earn respect, you must abandon the need for approval. To find peace, you must be willing to face discomfort directly. These contradictions aren't puzzles to solve. They're polarities to navigate, territories to explore with both courage and humility. The map is not the territory. The description is not the experience. The word water will never quench your thirst. If control has cost you peace, comment, "I understand." If these words are finding you at the edge of transformation, that knife edge between who you've been and who you're becoming, stay with me. The journey deepens here. The most profound changes aren't announced with fanfare. They arrive quietly, like dawn breaking over mountains. You don't force the sun to rise. You position yourself to witness it, to be changed by its inevitable arrival. Beneath your reactions lies a stillness waiting to be reclaimed. When someone criticizes you, where in your body do you feel the first response? That tightness in your chest, the heat rising to your face, the sudden dryness in your throat. These are ancient signals, evolutionary whispers from a time when social rejection meant death. But you are not your ancestors. The threats you face rarely require immediate action. Yet your nervous system hasn't received this update. How many decisions have you made from this place of unnecessary alarm? How many words have you spoken not because they were true, but because they were defensive? The Stoic doesn't deny emotion. He transforms it through understanding. Pain isn't optional, but suffering often is. Look closely at what disturbs your peace. How much comes from events themselves, and how much from the story you've attached to those events? The narrative you've constructed about what things mean, about what others think, about what might happen tomorrow. These stories feel real because you've rehearsed them countless times, polishing them until they gleam with the appearance of truth. But appearances deceive the untrained eye. Your attention is the most valuable resource you possess, yet you give it away freely to whatever shouts loudest. The news that angers you, the comment that wounds your pride, the uncertainty that triggers anxious planning. Each of these takes a piece of your limited focus, leaving less for what truly matters. The discipline of attention isn't about forcing concentration, it's about recognizing when you've been captured and gently returning to what deserves your care. Where does your mind go when you stop directing it? This default reveals your unconscious priorities. Modern masculinity has become a performance without depth. All form, no substance. Men compete to appear unaffected while being more influenced than ever by opinions that shouldn't matter. The Stoic alternative isn't emotional suppression. It's emotional intelligence, not numbness but clarity, not isolation but carefully chosen connection. Have you noticed how rarely you feel truly seen by others? Perhaps because you've learned to show them only what you think they want to see. The fragments deemed acceptable, marketable, uncomplicated. There is a power in boundaries that few understand, not walls built from fear, but clear perimeters established with calm certainty. What deserves your energy? What deserves your anger? What deserves your love? These questions require ruthless honesty, the kind that strips away comfortable illusions about your motivations. Most never ask them because the answers would demand change, and change threatens the identity you've invested in maintaining. But identity is not fixed, it's a river, not a stone. What might be possible if you stopped clinging to its familiar banks? The mind seeks certainty like a drowning man gasps for air. It will sacrifice truth for conviction, depth for simplicity, growth for comfort. Notice this tendency without judgment. It served your ancestors well in simpler times when quick decisions meant survival. Today, this same instinct leads many men to intellectual tribalism, to reflexive positions they haven't truly examined, to arguments they defend not because they're true, but because abandoning them feels like death. What beliefs are you protecting that might actually be limiting your vision? Respect cannot be demanded. It can only be earned through a consistency that requires no explanation. The desperate search for validation creates the opposite effect. It signals insecurity, not strength. The truly centered man doesn't need others to confirm his worth, because he's done the harder work of confirming it himself, not through empty affirmations, but through actions aligned with his deepest values. When was the last time you honored your principles at personal cost? These moments, invisible to most, form the foundation of genuine self-respect that others eventually sense without being told. If these words have awakened something that was sleeping inside you, write, "I'm listening deeper now." The journey continues beyond what's comfortable, beyond the surface understanding that allows for temporary inspiration, but not lasting change. Tell me what resistance is arising in you right now. What part of this truth feels most threatening to the story you've been living? The most profound growth often begins at the edge of our greatest discomfort. In the questions we've been avoiding, in the silences we've been filling with noise. The quality of your life emerges from the quality of your questions. Most men ask, "How can I get what I want?" The Stoic asks, "Are my wants worthy of who I'm becoming?" This shift, from external acquisition to internal alignment, marks the boundary between adolescent and mature masculinity. It's the difference between the man who needs constant validation and the man who generates his own gravity. Which questions guide your decisions? Which voice do you honor when they conflict? The crowd rarely rewards depth, but depth doesn't seek the crowd's approval. Your attention has been weaponized against you. Every notification, headline, and social feed is designed to hijack your focus, to keep you reactive rather than responsive, scattered rather than centered. This isn't conspiracy, it's business. Your distraction is profitable to systems that require your constant engagement. The Stoic practice of attention isn't just philosophical, it's revolutionary. To reclaim your mental sovereignty in an age engineered to compromise it is to engage in a quiet rebellion. Have you noticed how uncomfortable extended silence has become? How quickly the hand reaches for the phone when stillness arrives? The impulse to explain yourself betrays a fundamental insecurity. Watch how often you feel the need to justify your decisions, to make others understand your reasoning, to defend yourself against unspoken judgments. What if you simply acted from conviction and allowed the results to speak for themselves? Mountains don't explain their height. Rivers don't justify their course. There is dignity in the statement made without words, in the life lived without apology. Not from arrogance, but from clarity about what is and isn't your responsibility. Society celebrates visible achievement while overlooking the invisible discipline that creates it. The workout everyone sees, the 100 silent mornings of practice they don't. The promotion announced on social media, the years of thankless work never mentioned. This disparity creates men who crave recognition more than excellence, who build facades instead of foundations. True growth happens in darkness, in the private moments when you choose the harder path not because anyone is watching, but because you know it's right. When did you last do something excellent that no one will ever know about? The capacity to be alone with yourself determines the authenticity of your connections with others. Most relationships are built on mutual distraction. Partnerships formed not from genuine compatibility, but from the shared fear of facing oneself. Look at your closest relationships. Do they encourage your highest expression, or do they maintain comfortable patterns that neither party wishes to disrupt? The Stoics understood that meaningful bonds aren't formed through constant contact, but through the resonance of complementary values. Proximity without purpose creates attachment, not depth. Your resistance to this message reveals what needs attention. The discomfort arising now, the urge to dismiss these ideas as too extreme, too demanding, too contrary to how normal people live. This is the boundary of your current identity protecting itself. Growth requires temporary disorientation. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly without first dissolving into formless potential. What parts of your current self are you most reluctant to question? These are precisely the areas where transformation waits, disguised as impossibility. The modern world trains men to mistake urgency for importance. Your time and energy, finite, irreplaceable resources, are drained by what feels pressing rather than what is truly significant. This distortion slowly erodes your capacity for meaningful action, replacing it with the illusion of productivity. The Stoic practice of distinguishing between the essential and the peripheral isn't about efficiency. It's about integrity, about ensuring that your limited life force serves what matters most to you, not what shouts loudest for your attention. How many of today's urgent matters will matter in a month? In a year? In a decade? We've reached a turning point in this conversation, a moment of choice. You can receive these words as interesting philosophy, as content to consume and forget, or you can recognize them as a mirror reflecting aspects of yourself that demand honest examination. The difference isn't in the words themselves, but in your willingness to be changed by them. If something within you has been disturbed, awakened, or challenged by what you've heard, write "I choose awareness" below. Tell me which idea has taken root most deeply in your mind. The conversation continues within you long after these words end, in the quiet moments when the truth can finally be heard. The price of respect is paid in private, not in grand declarations or performative wisdom, but in moments when no one watches, when the easier path calls loudly and you choose the necessary one instead. What happens in that space between provocation and response? This is where your authority is forged or surrendered, not in what happens to you, but in what happens through you. The man who demands respect never receives it. The man who embodies it rarely needs to speak its name. Your mind still resists the power of emptiness. It fears the void because in silence pretense dissolves. The masks you've worn, each one a negotiation with what you thought others needed, lie scattered at your feet now. Which will you leave there? The ancient Stoics understood what modern men have forgotten. Strength doesn't announce itself. It permeates. The still water holds the mountain's reflection perfectly. The noisy river shows nothing but its own turbulence. What you do when no one is watching has finally caught up with what everyone can see. They don't know why your presence shifts the room. They simply feel the gravity of a man who has stopped performing. The oak stands. The crowd adjusts. Notice how your need for validation has been replaced by something steadier, something that no external voice can grant or remove. This is not arrogance, it's alignment. The peace that comes when inner and outer worlds no longer wage war against each other. The question returns deeper now. What worthy challenge calls to you from beyond comfort? Not the frantic chasing that exhausted you before, but the deliberate pursuit that focuses rather than fragments. The door stands ajar, not as escape but as threshold. The clenched fist that once struck outward now opens, not in surrender, but in readiness to grasp what matters. Power flows toward purpose. The empty cup receives. The full cup only spills. We live in a world that profits from your distraction, your insecurity, your endless reaching for what cannot satisfy. The counter-movement begins within, in your refusal to trade depth for approval, substance for appearance, truth for comfort. This is not withdrawal from life, but fuller engagement with it, unmoved by praise, undeterred by criticism. The marble doesn't explain itself. Neither should you. Your worth isn't open for negotiation. If these words have marked you, leave your mark below. Share this silence with another man who needs to remember what he already knows. Comment with the mask you're leaving behind today. Subscribe to continue this journey into the strength that doesn't shout, the power that doesn't plead, the respect that arrives unbidden when you finally stop chasing its shadow. The most profound truths rarely announce themselves. They reveal themselves in how you live when no one is applauding. Presence before praise, substance before surface. The silence decides.